future is video. It's a good title. Probably very self-fulfilling, and if it's archived 10 years from now, I think you'll be right. So we agree. I think we're going to transition into a little more complex discussion around internet economics, but we're also, in my presentation, I'm going to share some notes on what we're doing at Comcast around our CDN. We've never really talked about that in a big way, so I thought this might be an appropriate forum to share some ideas. So Dan asked me to introduce myself real briefly. My name is Barry Tishkart. I'm VP of Business Development. I also run our wholesale business at Comcast. We'll explain what that is in a little while. I've been with Comcast about 4 years, and prior to that I was in a variety of engineering and marketing positions at Sprint. So jumping right into what we're going to talk about today, we're going to try not to be too repetitive to what Chris talked about. Clearly, there is a tremendous growth in video, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing from an operator perspective and how that growth in video is manifesting itself across products and services in our portfolio. So a few notes about who we are and the role we play in the video distribution space. Comcast began as a small pioneering cable operator in the 1960s in Tupelo, Mississippi, and since then we've become an ISP, a phone company, and entered into many other businesses, including programming ourselves, most recently joining in a joint venture with NBC Universal. So as you can see, we're not just a content, we're not just an ISP, but we also share a lot of concerns with those in the room today as a content producer, a content originator, a distributor, and all the interactions that go on between those groups, both within the company and within the commercial market. So I think we have a pretty interesting perspective. So size-wise, our earnings are pretty fresh. We just announced them last week. From a customer perspective, on the cable side, we have about 23 million video customers using Xfinity TV, 17 million broadband internet customers, and 9 million phone customers. So a few network notes just to kind of size this and put in perspective what we do and how we do it. And I'll just pick out some interesting facts related to this particular market. 200 million web views per day. That's pretty astounding. 75 billion DNS transactions on our network per day. And we'll get into talking about our CDN, why we have a CDN, and what we do with it. Size-wise, we have about half a petabyte of library storage and over 700 streaming servers. And we do currently about 350 million views per month. Included in that is tens of millions of movies. So what roles do we as Comcast play in video distribution? Well, there's obviously the linear side where MPEG signals are delivered to set-top boxes and more to IP devices. In VOD, video on demand, that's a significant part of our Xfinity TV service. And as Chris talked about, the trends we see in time shifting, location shifting, and user control, video on demand has been an integral part of our service. Certainly over the last few years, and it's one of the most sticky services we have. Certainly, that's kind of helped the trend of online video where people get used to being able to search for and watch the content that they want to watch, when they want to watch it, and on the device they want to watch it from. So also from the ISP side with the Xfinity Internet, we talked about 17 million broadband customers. We've launched speeds up to 105 megabits per second. So that gives us some good insight into the market. Clearly, from being that large of an ISP, we're a great enabler and a great partner with the choices on online video that are out there today. So we certainly, customers take advantage of Netflix, Hulu, and all the other kinds of streaming services that we talked about earlier. One interesting point is the number of IP-connected devices that our network serves is over 76 million. And so that really just includes cable boxes, cable modems, and voice adapters. It doesn't include all the devices that people are now bringing into their homes, like tablets or watching on PCs connected via a Wi-Fi connection, So, literally, this number is probably double, if not triple, when you factor in that many homes have more than one PC. Many consumers have cell phones that, when they're in their home, may operate on their home Wi-Fi network. So it's pretty expansive, that the number of devices that we're delivering to. In addition to I wanted to touch on a little bit how we work with third-party CDNs, because I'm going to talk about our CDN, but it's also important to note that we, as Comcast, have relationships with several third-party CDNs to help us deliver traffic, both on-net and on-net traffic, and do things like site acceleration. So we're pretty familiar with the market. NBCU is a big content owner and distributor, has its own relationships, and they certainly have their own needs as well, which will continue to grow. We have a wholesale IP transit business. So through that business, we work with a lot of CDNs to provide interconnect to our network and to provide transit to other networks. And then finally, we have a vested interest in the growth of technology in this space. So we find ourselves partnering a lot on some of the concepts Chris talked about, or directly with CDNs or other equipment vendors in the space to mature those technologies and grow the overall market. So a few thoughts about our CDN. It's really there to help enable choice. Our CDN has not been around that long. We started building it in about 2007. And we did that because we recognized the need for this time shift and location shift in video is happening, and we need to provide a platform to be able to do that and grow that over time. So now we have about 5 times as many content, over 5 times as much content as we did before we had this CDN, 25,000 choices, which equates to over 60,000 hours of video available. We went to a more hierarchical model because we had distributed storage all over the country, and that was inefficient when you're dealing with this many titles. So we have a hierarchical video storage system and regional caches and local servers to stream the video down from our head ends. And we handle both traditional delivery to set-top boxes and to IP endpoints over this CDN. The other thing that Chris mentioned, and I'll touch again on this later, is DRM. So we're trying to keep up with the latest and greatest in what we see and the preferences from the studios in terms of what they want to see from a DRM perspective, and integrate that seamlessly with our CDN platform. So we also recognize in CDN, bit delivery is an important thing, right? We have a lot of video tonnage, and being able to deliver that cost effectively and seamlessly is important. So we built this network to cost effectively receive, encode, and store and stream video to our customers, but we also built it for control. So give customers the ability to pause, fast forward, channel change in the cloud, allow for a lot of control on soft clients that would be resident on devices like iPads rather than the traditional set-top box environment, and make that all work together. So a lot of work has gone on to build a platform that can take us from the traditional means of viewing video in a cable environment to something that's really a more anytime, anywhere delivery environment. One thing I also want to mention about our CDN is that unlike some of our competitors such as AT&T and Verizon, we're really not in the commercial CDN business per se. What I've just talked about is really to serve our own video on demand needs. And again, what we do is really use our infrastructure and collaborate with others to deliver the best entertainment choices anytime, anywhere. So this is a slide on the growth of video on demand, and we exited 2010 at a rate of 4.7 billion video on demand transactions per year. That's both TV shows, movies, and other clips that we have available on our platform. So we foresee significant growth continuing. Again, it's one of our most sticky services. It's something that most of our subscribers have learned how to use, and on a per subscriber level, we see that increasing, as well as the total number of transactions increasing. Recently, we became the first company to offer on demand from all 4 major broadcast networks. So at this point, I'm going to segue a little bit from talking about CDN and the video on demand context and talk a little bit more about video in the ISP context. And this is what we're seeing. Chris shared some numbers around what he's seeing overall. I think this is pretty consistent. We developed this slide at the end of 2010, and we looked for some other consumable products that had a 45% compound annual growth rate over time. And the truth is there aren't very many. So the growth in video is fairly staggering, and it's going to continue. So let me talk from a ISP perspective around the consumption drivers, what we see both today and in the future. Historically, it's all been about more users consuming video on more devices, richer applications, better content out there, for example, people spending more and more time in front of those devices as the applications become richer and the content became better, and then certainly the availability of video. So that's really the historical trend. I mean, and historical means up until right now. And I don't think these drivers are going to go away. They're going to be augmented by a few things that are going to probably ramp the growth more specifically or more aggressively. So what are a few of those things? For example, pent-up TCP demand. The TCP protocol tends to consume all available bandwidth and send messages to the operating system around how to take advantage of that. Now, some of the enhancements to TCP will allow new iOSs, new operating systems, to do a better job of taking advantage of the bandwidth available. So while a lot of people might have been buying a fast internet service, but have found their ability to stream limited at 5 megabits or even lower, depending on the age of your PC and operating system, TCP enhancements will do away with some of that and allow protocols and allow applications to more aggressively consume bandwidth. Same is true with adaptive codecs. So the codecs and some of the clients that have some intelligence to look at the bandwidth available and adjust your streaming rate to maybe a higher level, like an HD level, are going to be out there. And those, again, will drive more consumption from ISPs and ramp up some of the traffic that Chris talked about. And another driver is really machine-to-machine. So while the population might only be growing at 1%, and subscription rates are growing at the numbers that you've seen publicly reported, machine-to-machine communications, or machines that are able to talk to one another, are growing at a faster clip, probably closer to 40% per year. So all those machines talking is going to be, again, another driver, maybe not specific to video. And then finally, inefficient design. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. So sort of inefficient design combined with machine-to-machine has a dramatic effect on networks. And we want to consider some thoughts around that. This is an example related to inefficient design and machine-to-machine. So this is a low-cost surveillance camera, many of which are on display at CES. And if any of you have invested in a new home security system recently, you'll note that many of them come with these low-cost cameras that you could then access from your iPhone or tablet or your PC or in the cloud. We found with a lot of these devices is that they're not MPEG encoded. One of the vendors said to us, well, I don't want to pay for the licenses and bandwidth is free. Well, the bandwidth is free part is not true. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the example here is that using some of these low-cost surveillance cameras in a machine-to-machine environment, you see how if you just encode it in MPEG, you have tremendous efficiency. And bandwidth efficiency is innovation. It tends to be good for both the ISP and the end user. So I know a lot has been done to promote bandwidth efficiency within the online video ecosystem, and we encourage that. And we'll talk about why from an economics perspective in a minute. So one stat very relevant to this audience and something that we're fairly accurately able to measure is that CDN source 50 to 60% of traffic. Many of you have probably seen this graph before. It comes from the famous article in Wired magazine about the volume of ISP traffic that Netflix alone accounts for. But it is true that most entertainment and a lot of web traffic comes or originates from CDNs. Also true that most e-commerce, most major e-commerce sites, and most major social networking sites are supported by CDNs. And some CDNs are doubling in traffic every 12 months. That's traffic into the consumer ISP networks. And as an example of that, during 2010, 4 autonomous system numbers, so 4 internet networks, contributed about 50% of the total ingress traffic into Comcast. So that gives you a sense of how substantial, how substantially content has aggregated amongst a few large networks. That's a trend that has really occurred over the past couple years. Arbor Networks and some others have done some nice studies, and there's been several articles written about that point. But the key there, so if you think about a lot of content being available from just a handful of sources, this has to do with user experience, and it's also an area where we try to partner with CDNs on. Because when something goes wrong with a consumer not being able to open a website, or they're getting some kind of error, or their Netflix video buffers, or anything that could go wrong, the point to realize here is there's a lot of systems, there's a lot of capabilities that the ISP does not have control over. So, how well the CDNs are interconnected to ISP networks, how well the CDNs localize traffic, how hot they're running ports, and how fast they're able to load videos and objects. So, there's been a few well-publicized outages on the internet that have occurred in some of the major back-end systems that serve video to customers or account for or authenticate subscribers. And, when those things happen, it certainly drives calls to us. But I think users are starting to become more educated about the back end of the internet. Certainly the younger generation is. But again, it's an area we all can partner around as to when these things do happen, when outages do occur, try to get the right sources of information to consumers and try to solve the problems effectively. So what are some of the cost components that make up the investments that are going to need to be put into place in ISP networks to support the traffic growth? It's really billions and billions of dollars. Billions of dollars that's in the ground today, and that's going to have to go into the plant to support the future growth. These are some examples of the categories of cost components of traffic delivery. You'll see the backbone percentage of it, so the point in which we talked about earlier about having a backbone, and a lot of it is our fiber, some of it's IRUs. There's over 160,000 route miles of it. Is a big part of the network to move traffic from place to place, move video from origin to head end. But the bigger part of it is really in the metro networks and the CMTSs, which are essentially the point at which cable modems aggregate into our network, and the hybrid fiber coax plant. And all of that gets expanded every year based on forecasts of growth, forecasts of new services, and we will continue to build to meet the needs of the growing demand for online video. It's also interesting to point out that because of the traffic that is interconnected with us being about 50 to 60%, it's interesting to note that every minute we move hundreds of terabits of traffic between us, between our network and our interconnect partners. And for perspective, a terabit of traffic is roughly equal to the number, to the amount of books that would be made from 50,000 trees. So we're very proficient at moving traffic from edge to core and back, and it's something that we'll continue to have to do and get better at as the market grows. So, we've talked about the growth being fairly staggering. Let's talk about how it's funded. We said billions of dollars of investment. And internet economics are admittedly complex. I mean, There are so many consumers and businesses engaging in various types of transactions, both on the surface of the internet and in the core. And if you just remember back to basic economics, it's really all about choices. You have a lot of choices. So examples of transactions that involve CDNs in the content delivery market could start with basic e-commerce, right? Just going online to buy a pair of shoes or buy an airline ticket. And site acceleration and other CDN services are enabling those transactions to happen. On the application side, monetizing searches, for example. On the infrastructure side, like Comcast buying routers from Cisco, or CDN buying co-location services from Telux or Equinix. So, a business buying web hosting or CDN services from a web hosting company, and maybe that web hosting company buys transit from Comcast. Or, a consumer buying a Netflix subscription, a Comcast customer buying Netflix subscription, or, Netflix buying CDN services from a number of CDNs. So all these transactions are happening, and they all have a direct or indirect component on how this growth is funded. But what I will say is that the economics of the internet are a delicate balance. Ever since major government funding for the internet core went away in the mid-90s, companies have worked together to try to figure it out and keep funding between the edge and core in rough balance, and find the right balance in the services they provide to consumers so consumers are able to make rational choices. And what a product costs, and what some of the infrastructure costs, and how things get interconnected. There's a lot of choices, and it's a fairly healthy, unregulated market. So let me wrap by talking about a few trends that will impact video and CDNs. And so these are some pretty safe bets that Forrester Research put together. So the future is video, and video will be watched on 3.5 devices per week. I'm sure there's a handful of people in the room who are already there, but on average, I think the general population will be at 3.5 devices and higher. I got to imagine everyone in the room is at least on 2 or 3 devices when you factor in TV, tablets, PCs, phones, etc. 40% of viewing will be user-controlled, on-demand, time-shifted type viewing, either via video on demand from a cable or satellite provider, or using a service like Netflix. And 25% of all video minutes, so not, this is kind of a tonnage, convert the minutes into amount of traffic, will be delivered over the internet. And I think the providers, as Chris kind of indicated, will will weigh that one way or another. I still think that 25% will happen if we do nothing, but if providers really start to move their internet-based, their TV-based offerings to the internet or deliver using IP, that number could be a lot greater. It could be 50% or higher. So clearly that has a relationship to the way we need to grow our platform, the way economics need to evolve to support that growth, and the projections we have into the future. So looking a little farther out, the trend is that physical media disappears. So all those DVDs lining the racks at Target and video stores will be replaced by assets that move into the cloud. And customers can access those from various devices, those 3.5 or more devices, seamlessly across their TVs, from set-top boxes, from a tablet over a Wi-Fi network. The key will be authentication. The key will be digital rights. So we clearly understand that the future is digital rights just by the nature of the content relationships that we have today on the cable business and the ones that we have in terms of our broadcast and content ownership stake with NBCU and the other cable networks that we have. The future will be digital rights, and we're working to effectively monetize and technologically implement those capabilities. So with that, I'll bid you good day. I think we have a great set of panels lined up. We'll be doing one in the room next door on transparent caching, and a panel in here about CDN interconnect that I think Chris and I will both be part of those 2 panels. And we probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, Dan, right? Okay, thanks. Yep. right up front.
If you think about the risks to this vision over the next 4 or 5 years playing out, do you think that the biggest risk is either regulation, DRM, or technology? And just a little bit of color on that would be helpful.
Yeah, biggest risk being regulation, technology, or DRM. I would add, a fourth category in there. I think usability is a big one. So making these products and services more usable and accessible to people. Doing so is going to require cooperation with a lot of entities, and that gets to, I think, a risk being DRM. So if DRM authentication can happen effectively, and you have a usable platform that could be transferred across multiple devices, I think getting to that point will be the biggest risk. Yeah, right back there.
Barry, any thoughts on your use of third-party CDNs as you build out your CDN? How does your use of third parties change over the next few years?
Yeah, the question was, how does our use of third parties change over the next few years? I think what we've learned with CDNs is there's always a make versus buy calculation. Infrastructure is expensive. We usually like to place our dollars in the areas that are going to be, that we can most effectively impact performance and deliver superior service to our customers. So, right now with CDN pricing the way it is, the competition in the market, it's a nice balance to be able to use third-party CDNs. We don't see our use of third-party CDNs being totally eliminated anytime soon. And there's some, ancillary capabilities that third-party CDNs don't necessarily offer that we would like to take advantage of, even from an IT perspective. So I think it's going to, be a complementary strategy going forward. And then Chris talked about CDN federation, which is something that's also interesting, something we're looking at, but we don't yet have a formal plan around that today. Far back by the water.
Yes, please talk about your business model and business practices when dealing with third-party CDNs, especially in light of something what's happened that transpired between Comcast and Level 3. Who charges whom for what?
So the question, the question was around business practices in terms of wholesale in dealing with third-party CDN. There was also a part of that question that talked about a publicized dispute between Comcast and Level 3. And, the key there is that we have a wholesale model that's competitive from a market rate perspective for interconnect with CDNs. We've been in the market for that service for about 3 years. Obviously, we can talk about the downturn in transit pricing. We've been very competitive and very market-based and focused with our pricing and work closely with a lot of CDNs because it's good for the internet and good for the industry. Around Level 3 specifically, Comcast and Level 3 have long-standing mutual business relationships, and I can't comment with respect to the issue around interconnect. Suffice it to say, there's discussions, and all those are under NDA. So Dan says one more question. I got. Yeah.
So, how do you see, as more and more content becomes available over the top, directly over the internet, how do you see the shift, or are you worried about a lot of your customer base shifting towards just becoming broadband-only customers as your content, your CDN becomes less and less important, and they can get what they want just over the top through the internet? Are you worried about that, or how do you see that shift?
Yeah. So the question was around the shift from perhaps usage of or consumption of cable subscriptions to a more online model where customers can get almost anything they want online. Are we worried about that? Well, clearly it's got to be something to worry about, right? Only the paranoid survive, as Andy Grove says. So, yeah, I mean, but because of that, I mean, we do look at usability. We do look at what our customers want. Our customers want the ability to time shift, and so it's incumbent upon us to create the products and services that they can more fully, more fully and richly utilize the breadth of content available. And we recognize the alternatives that are out there today. We know millions of our subscribers take advantage of those alternatives in one way or another, but a lot of them augment their subscriptions. So, it's a market where we continually have to be innovating and continually have to partner with, content owners and other alternative sources of video to grow the whole pie. And that's really how we look at it. So, all right. Thank you.